a lot of people have just been like, oh yeah, this is such a beneficial bracket shape up for the Lakers. And I do think that they probably would prefer playing the Timberwolves than the Warriors in the first round. That being said, I don't think this Minnesota series is going to just be a cakewalk like a lot of people are thinking about. I think people are looking back to, like you mentioned, what Luka did against Timberwolves last year in the Western Conference Finals, and thinking about Timberwolves and that they've been up and down this year and Julius Randle's playoff woes and all of those things. But I think we're in for a fight. I'm still leaning Lakers, but I think it's going to be a fight. I'll swing it to you, who you're thinking about, who your eyes are on as this series gets underway, as potential people who can kind of sway things.
I didn't have a player for an X factor on this one on the Lakers side. I actually had JJ Redick as the X factor because I really feel like how he can find a way to exploit one of the best defenders of all time. He's got 4 Defensive Player of the Years in Rudy Gobert. How he can find a way to exploit Rudy Gobert in space in the playoffs, utilizing Luka, LeBron, and Austin Reeves to make him uncomfortable and make Rudy Gobert have to defend on the perimeter. Like, that is what the Mavs did so well last year with Luka and Kyrie in the playoffs, and how they were able to, just put a wall up against what the Timberwolves were rolling throughout the entire playoffs. And then they faced Dallas, and they exploited one of Minnesota's biggest strengths in their 2-big lineup and turned it into a weakness. And, obviously they don't have Karl-Anthony Towns anymore, but, on the defensive side of the ball, him and Julius Randle are almost 1-for-1. And between him and Rudy Gobert, I mean, someone's going to have to eventually guard Luka, Austin Reeves, or LeBron in space. And I know that JJ Redick is already devising a game plan to try and, utilize those matchups and make them an advantage for the Lakers. I think how he exploits Minnesota's defense is going to be one of the biggest talking points in this series as the series plays out. But at the same time, I think that the Wolves are going to be ready for this. I think Jaden McDaniels is very much an X factor on their end because he's going to spend most of the time guarding Luka. I'm sure he'll spend some time on LeBron as well. Anthony Edwards is also someone who's not afraid to step up to a defensive challenge, especially in the postseason. I'm sure he'll spend some time on Austin Reeves, some time on Luka. I'm kind of curious to see how the Wolves plan on matching up, but I do think that JJ Redick and how he plans to attack Minnesota defense and Rudy Gobert in particular will be a massive swing point in the series. Yeah,
this series is going to be a chess match for sure, because I was thinking about that and talking to our resident Wolves fan, Matt Latofsky, about it and asking him his thoughts just from a Wolves fan's perspective, and also seeing people out there just in space talking about it, comparing this year's series to last year's series. And obviously Luka's on a completely different team, but when you think back to kind of the key to that series and what unlocked Luka was the presence of Gafford and the presence of Derek Lively. All right, Jackson Hayes, step up. I know that, when Mark Williams was expected to be that guy and all that stuff fell through, we were saying, I don't know if Jackson Hayes is the guy. I don't know if he's ready. Now, Jackson Hayes is much better with Luka Doncic than he is without Luka Doncic, but is he going to be good enough to convert those lobs? Even 1 or 2 in a game just opens so much up for that offense and allows you to potentially play Rudy Gobert off the floor. Conversely, do they put LeBron at the 5 at some point in time because he's capable of doing that, and then playing Rudy Gobert off the floor? And I think that's going to be a big thing because it'll be harder, I think, this year to play him off the floor or to scheme around that. But like you said, JJ Redick is smart enough to do that. So when I was thinking about that, I was thinking about Jackson Hayes. I actually wrote down Rui Hachimura because I think that he's going to be that guy who stepped up. And we've said it before, we've always kind of been waiting for him to come back down to earth. And at a certain point, it's like, maybe he just is this, 38, 39, 40% three-point shooter, especially as wide open as these looks are for him. And Jared Vanderbilt as well. Revenge arc for him and Julius Randle in this series. But thinking about him coming off the bench and being that guy. And another name I wrote down, because I wouldn't be surprised if he comes off the bench and hits, if he comes to the game and he hits 5 or 6 threes one of these games, but Dante DiVincenzo, I could see him having a big game. It just feels like there's going to be a game where he goes in crypto, Staples, whatever, and just hits a couple threes and everybody's just mad and he's just feeling himself because he did that a couple weeks ago in Milwaukee. So I'm really excited about the series. I am leaning Lakers. I think, again, this is probably going to be a Lakers in 6 type series, and where they just kind of wear down on the Timberwolves and they don't have much left. They don't have any more answers. And by the time they figured everything out, series is over. But I don't know if that's fair or if you think it's shorter or longer than that.
I got Lakers in 7. I think this one's going the distance. I really feel like we're going to see some heavyweight punches back and forth throughout this series. And it could be one where, the Lakers go up 2-0 and then Minnesota takes it back to Minnesota and ties it up 2-2. Yeah. And then it's a best of 3 from there. But, I really do think that these teams are more evenly matched than people seem to be talking about it early on here. And I do think that, there are also mismatches that the Timberwolves present for the Lakers that they're going to have to figure out defensively as well. So, it's a lot of the talk is focused around like, how are the Wolves going to guard the Lakers? But, the Lakers are going to have to figure it out on the defensive end as well, because like you said, they have guys like Dante and Nikhil can get hot coming off the bench too. Naz Reid, 6th man of the year last year, still having a great season. Like Anthony Edwards, he speaks for himself. You got Mike Conley who can knock down outside shots. Who knows what version of Julius Randle we're going to get? But like, if it's good Julius Randle, that's another problem that the Lakers are going to have to face. So, and Rudy Gobert, not for nothing, like has been playing pretty strong basketball on both sides of the ball coming down the stretch here too. So, the Wolves are a team that they were really hot last year. They knocked off the Nuggets. They had a ton of momentum. Ant was getting, face of the league, like all these different, he was finding himself in all these different types of, narrative-based conversations. But like, they almost feel a little bit forgotten going into this year's playoffs. And I really do think that like, obviously anything can happen in a game 7. And if it's going to go to the distance, they have just as good of a shot at winning this series as the Lakers do. And I think it's going to be a lot closer than people might think.
Yeah, I'm with you right there. Completely agree with you on that one. One last one out in California, since we'll stay on the Western Coast before we throw it to a break, because we don't know who the Thunder are going to play. And I don't really think that there's much to talk about with the Thunder, Grizzlies, or Mavericks. But that being said, Rockets Warriors could end up being the best series. And this is a big, big, big opportunity for the Rockets to grow up right in real time. It helps to have Fred VanVleet. It helps to have Dylan Brooks. But a lot of the guys on this team, their first postseason playoff experience comes against a 4-time champion and one of the greatest to ever do it in Steph Curry. And then again, like we said, Jimmy Butler, one of the greatest postseason risers because he did it in the play-in tournament as well. Early reads on Rockets Warriors. I'm feeling Houston, but I think I'm putting a lot of stock into what we saw during the regular season too.
I'm gonna bounce back to you real quick. Are you surprised that the Warriors are favored in this series? Like I was, I would have thought that it would have been pretty close to even. The Warriors they're like, in terms of Vegas, like they're pretty heavily favored to win this.
Yeah, surprised from a basketball perspective, absolutely. I think, but from a narrative perspective, I'm pretty sure. I think the public, especially the betting public, is like, we've seen the story before, and it feels a lot like what we saw. Memphis Lakers a couple years ago when that 7-2, Lakers won the play, honestly, down to like having to win a tight play-in tournament game against this young up and coming team that nobody's really been paying attention to and nobody really knows about, except there's even less star power, I would think, in Houston than Memphis had a couple years ago because at least they had Ja. So I'm feeling that a little bit, and maybe I am wrong for going against Steph Curry because you shouldn't go against Steph Curry. But I don't know, man. I feel like we've said it all year. The Rockets deserve some respect, and maybe I'm picking the wrong time to give it to them, but I'm giving them the respect they deserve.
Yeah. So the big thing that this came down to, and again, like I didn't pick a specific player for X Factor. I have some in mind, but like the X Factor that I had down was playoff experience. Yeah. Rockets starting 5 has 74 playoff games under their belt. Steph has, I think it was like 150. Draymond's at like 160. Jimmy Butler's played like 120. Ooh. So like, just in terms of straight up playoff experience. And like, yes, they have some guys coming off the bench that have played in playoff games. Like Steven Adams has played in a ton of playoff games. Obviously Jeff Green, who's not really like in the rotation, but he's like, they got guys in the locker room that have playoff experience and can help these younger guys navigate like, all right, hey, this is what a playoff series and like what a playoff game feels like. But until you're actually in that, it's pretty tough to figure it out. You got to figure it out on your own. And like, with that being said, I do have the Warriors winning the series, and I went back and forth a lot on this because like I want to give the Rockets their respect too. I think that there is going to be a level of like, I don't give a what, like this is just another game to us. We've been playing this ball all year, like. But I do. I went back to like that Warriors Kings series where the Warriors were the 6th seed, and they were favored as a 6th seed, and they won Game 7. And then, like you just said, that Lakers Grizzlies series came to mind as well of 2 examples that are very similar to this. But I think that. With the Warriors, you know where you're getting it from. It's going to be Steph. It's going to be Jimmy. And there's going to be other contributors throughout the series around those 2 guys where like we've talked about it all year with the Rockets. Where is it coming from? Like, can Jalen Green give you 30 points in a playoff game? Alperen Şengün, like what does that matchup look like against Draymond Green? Fred VanVleet is obviously like a very stabilizing player, but at this stage in his career, can he give you those big playoff performances? So, I'm curious to see how the Rockets find consistent sources of offense to keep up with Steph and keep up with Jimmy, and keep up with what, a pretty decent looking Warriors offense since they integrated Jimmy Butler into the lineup. But, with that being said, the Rockets get it done on the defensive end, and that's where they hang their hat. And Dylan Brooks is going to be a major X factor in this, trying to not only, physically and on the court, stop Jimmy Butler, but also the mental game. Can he get Jimmy Butler out of his psyche a little bit and maybe make him lose his cool, or same with Draymond. Can he get him going and maybe get him to lose his cool and kind of lose his focus a little bit? So there's going to be a game within the game here in this series. I really think so. Ime Udoka is the same way. Like, he brings this like edge to him that I feel like he's going to be talking shit from the sidelines, trying to get these guys' heads and everything, get Draymond going and whatnot. So, I think this has the potential to be the actual best, like in terms of basketball, the best series, even though it maybe isn't the one that people are talking about the most, just because I think a lot of people don't understand how good the Rockets really are.
Yeah, it's funny. I was going to go to rebut saying like, hey, like, do they have to keep up with Steph's offense? I know I'm putting a lot in stock into it. Last time they played, 3 points, 1 of 10 shooting, and that impacted these numbers I'm about to say. But 3 regular season games against Houston, 16.3 points per game on 36.4, 30%, 80% shooting splits for Steph Curry. But again, that happens when you go 1 for 10 and 1 of 8 from 3 in a game and only score 3 points. That skews the averages a little bit, but I'm very excited to see what Ime Udoka employs defensively. And I do think that I wonder if, you're going to get Steph, you're going to get Jimmy, and that could get you as many as maybe even 90 points in the game. I don't know. I'm not putting a limit on either of those two guys, but the uncertainty after those guys with the Warriors, is it going to be Pods? Is it going to be Quentin Post? Is it going to be, Moses Moody? Who is it going to be that's going to be the guys who kind of supplement what you're going to get from Steph and Jimmy, with there being more known commodities in Houston? And I recognize that a lot of those guys aren't used to contributing at this stage, but if they muddy the game up and they make it ugly and you throw that element of physicality in there and the Warriors get knocked off of their game a little bit, then I could see things happening. And I kind of feel boring picking all these series to go to 6 games. If I go Rockets, though, they have to get it done in 6, because they're not winning a game 7 against Steph Curry. You know what I mean? I don't see that happening. It's, even if it's in Houston, having home court advantage will definitely help them. Maybe they can steal one early in the series or something like that. I could even see these teams, alternating games, 1-1-1-1 the first 4 games, and then Houston maybe figuring something out, or even wearing Golden State down, because Golden State just has a smaller margin of for error. I feel like, if Jimmy has an off night or something happens, somebody gets in foul trouble, I'm not gonna put injuries out there, but somebody gets in foul trouble early, that changes the entire complexion of a game for Golden State. So that's kind of why I'm leaning Houston. But the main thing is just, I'm believing in Ime Udoka. I'm believing in the physicality, and I'm thinking that they might be able to just impose their will against Golden State, which is crazy to say about a dynasty like that, but still.
Well, you know what? I saw yesterday that Ime Udoka was talking about like different ways that he can switch up lineups to match up and make Golden State uncomfortable. And he talked about using like a double big lineup with Alperen Şengün and Steven Adams potentially. And then like he also talked about how they could go small ball if they wanted to. And if they're running Draymond at the 5, they can play Jabari Smith at the 5. So it's like there are going to be different ways. And that's where I say like game within the game. Like these are 2 similar teams, but they're also very different in terms of the lineups that they can throw out there. And Steve Kerr obviously has been experimenting like crazy. Jonathan Kuminga is completely out of the rotation going into the playoffs. Like, at some point, is he going to interject his way back into the lineup because they need a jolt of athleticism and just kind of a spark off the bench against a young Rockets team? Like, maybe he's going to be forced to switch things up. But at the same time, like if Draymond's at the 5, maybe that's a way that they can make the Rockets uncomfortable, and maybe that plays Alperen Şengün off the floor a little bit. Like we've never seen Alpi in a playoff series, and I'm very curious to see what that looks like, because obviously a very dominant player, but he's not the slightest of foot in terms of like being able to guard on the perimeter. And I'm sure they're going to put him in a ton of actions with Steph and Jimmy Butler and try and make him uncomfortable and, try and take him out of the series. But I'm going to go Warriors in 6. Like you said, that's going to be a game 6 at Chase Center, and it's going to be rocking, and that's going to be a tough environment for these young guys to win in. And if the Rockets were to lose in the first round of the Warriors, I would not by any means call it a disappointing season, because they are ahead of schedule. It feels like the Thunder losing in the second round a little bit last year. Obviously losing in the first round too. Yeah, obviously losing in the first round is a little bit different, and like you have higher expectations than that. But like if you go down to a Warriors team like this that has this much playoff experience, and Steph, Jimmy, and Dre really trying to make like one last push, what it feels like for a championship, there's nothing to hang your head on there. I think it's going to be a great series, and I got the Warriors in 6, but I'm ready for the Rockets to fight.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. I'm really excited. I'm going to have my popcorn ready for that series. Thanks for checking out NBA Sound System Canada on YouTube. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe below and find us wherever you get your podcasts. And on Instagram, we have weekly episodes and bonus content throughout the week.